Well, welcome back to Digital World once again to another episode of Spliced In Later. It is once again movie review time, and yes, this is a hotly anticipated one. This is one that I'm sure a lot of people are eager to listen to, or maybe not even listen to, but just to be aware that this movie is out and available and people can finally see it. We are talking about Spider-Man No Way Home, the third in the Spider-Man trilogy starring Tom Holland, but also a continuing film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you are a regular listener to this channel, to this podcast, or however you do it, you know that the MCU probably gets the most coverage on this, aside from possibly Disney or just movie reviews in general. I'm a huge fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and what it has done, and I've been devoting a lot of my time to talking about it in various different ways, whether I'm going back through the movies one at a time to talk about the early days and how the MCU has evolved, or if I'm reviewing the newer stuff that has started coming out in 2021, whether it's through the movies in the movie theaters or the new Disney Plus shows that are coming out on Disney Plus and expanding the lore even more. But this one is interesting. This one, I got a lot to say about it, and it'll all be positive, don't worry. But some housekeeping first of all. Spider-Man in general, Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man has been around for a while. Before there even was an MCU, we had the Tobey Maguire movies directed by Sam Raimi from 2002 to 2007. Then in 2011, it was rebooted with Andrew Garfield, and we got two more movies, 2012 and 2014. All franchises are solid and strong in their own ways. Both Spider-Man actors are fantastic. Villains are great, sometimes overstuffed, but overall, it's very, 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 very common that Spider-Man is one of the most popular and most likable superheroes to come out of Marvel. There's just something about the Spider-Man character, his relatability, his sense of right and wrong, the setting of New York, the put upon life he has, the wacky villains he goes up against. It's just something that is very appealing, which is why Spider-Man has been mined the most. And then eventually we had that historic deal in 2016. Because Spider-Man, to make movie rights, is owned by Sony. Sony's not about to let that out. This comes from a time before Marvel Studios was formed, so other companies could buy out the rights to make movies about certain characters. But in historic deals, Sony did allow Marvel Studios to use Spider-Man in their world, provided that they could keep making their own Spider-Man movies. Now, not much has really come of that per se. We've had the Venom movies, and the Morbius movie is coming out next year. It seems that Sony's focusing more on the Spider-Man villains and trying to make movies out of them to varying degrees of success. But the Tom Holland Spider-Man that got to play in Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame, and then got his own movies, Homecoming and Far From Home, though technically Sony films, they're set in the Marvel Studios world. So those films could also have Iron Man, Captain America, Nick Fury, all of that stuff. Tom Holland has been very well received. Spider-Man, this version of him is very likable. He plays very well with the other Marvel Studios characters, but when he goes and headlines his own film, it's a different bag in terms of its approach, but it's nonetheless entertaining. Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home are definitely in the top 10 of MCU films. So naturally, this third one's coming out. And it sort of snuck in there because there was that delay with the COVID pandemic where movies like Black Widow and Shang-Chi got delayed. But Sony went off on its own and just squirreled away on this in private, and then eventually went, nope, the third Spider-Man movie is coming in December. And its advertising was unique in a way that I can appreciate now that I've seen the film, but leading up to it, I was annoyed. I got the secrecy in like announcing what the movie was going to be about and keeping hush-hush on what actually will happen or what the villains are. I liked when they started saying like, oh, you know, we've had Spidey hanging out with Iron Man in his first one and Nick Fury in the second one, so why not have Doctor Strange in the third one? But then as it was getting closer to the dates, rumors sort of abounded. They started to take off that after the success of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the animated Spider-Man film where he crosses paths with all these different Spider-Mans from different realities, that perhaps No Way Home was going to be this Spider-Man's version of Spider-Verse, and it was going to bring in supervillains from other movies, and hopefully probably even other Spider-Man actors would come in to play. And Marvel and Sony behind it would go, oh, that's the good theory, we like it, but don't get your hopes up. I don't think it's going to happen that way. But at the same time, they never denied it. And then trailers would come out and they would hint at stuff. They would show specifically villains. The villains would pop up in the trailers. And the people excited for this film started to make their own minds up and their own decisions about, yes, the movie's going to be about this. This is what's going to happen. And it was built into such a fervor that the movie itself was in danger of collapsing under its own reputation and excitement, so that people want this film to be one thing. Marvel and Sony won't confirm or deny, which heightens that expectations. And then people might go to this movie, not get what they want out of it, and then by that comparison, even though the movie might be fantastic, because it's not what they thought they were being promised, it goes downhill. So I didn't like that. I didn't like that the fans were building themselves up into a fervor, that they would accost actors on the street and say, you're in this movie, aren't you? And they're trying to either promote their other films or whatever. And even though they'd say yes or no, the public would make up their own minds. So I was excited for this film. I will admit that, of course. I'm excited for any MCU film that comes out. But I was also cautious and annoyed that it might be becoming more. It was sinking under its own rumor fire, whatever was going on. But I've seen it now. What do I think? Fantastic. Great. 9 out of 10. Probably my favorite film of the year. Thank you for listening to Spliced In Later. No, I'll go more into it. So I've just seen it. I went to as early screening as I could based on how I'm an old man. I can't do midnight screenings anymore. I fall asleep in them. Or not fall asleep, but they're little power naps. So I can't do that. Even if I am so excited for the film, I think it's just that, I'm tired. I can't keep my eyes open. So I locked myself in for a 6:30 session with a few friends, and we went to see it. And I will say that this is the first film since 2019, since probably Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, where it felt like a movie experience. I've been to many movies since the cinemas reopened and people started going back, but there's always been that sense of things not being as big as they were. Even the other Marvel movies I checked out, there was relatively large crowds in certain instances, but there wasn't this excitement. There wasn't this feeling that everybody was about to experience something unique. Going into the cinema for No Way Home, in the foyer, grabbing the tickets, waiting to go in, you could feel the buzz and excitement of everyone around you in a way that I have not felt since that excitement to see how the Star Wars saga would end. And then going into the cinema, the lights go down, everybody is quiet, which is fantastic. I love a movie where no one won't shut the hell up or is crunching away on their popcorn or whatever. And again, in an experience like that, when things happen in the movie, when things are revealed, where there's cameos or surprises or twists or callbacks or references, the audience reacts as a crowd in an excited way that you are pulled into that atmosphere as well. So even there were a couple of instances where I was like, okay, I can't actually hear the movie because people won't stop applauding. Aside from that, that experience definitely enlightened and highlighted my overall enjoyment. It's a fantastic movie. I don't know how much I can go into it though, because there's been so much secrecy about this film. Even the posters. Normally Marvel posters will give you a list of all the big names that are in the film. This has been on such a hush-hush. Even the trailers, while they've given little bits of tidbits away, little reveals about who is in the movie, what the story is, what might be happening, it's been relatively unknown. So I really went into this having no idea. I had my theories, but I didn't know for certain. And I can't really talk about a lot of the stuff that I really liked about it, because that is a result of seeing things happen in the movie that has been kept hush. And this is my reputation here on this podcast, show, whatever. I don't spoil the movies that just came out. If the movies have been out for a while, if they're sequels to other movies that have been out for a few years, it's fair game, because at that point people have had a chance to see it. But No Way Home is barely 48 hours old. It may not even be 24 hours old. So I'm not about to go, I liked this in the movie when this happened. I haven't seen it. Oh, well, I guess you know. And this movie is definitely best experienced if you don't know what's going to happen. You can have your theories and your opinions, but you go in completely blind, which is hard to do. I will request this to people who do go and see the movie. When you come out of the movie, don't be loudly discussing the things you saw while people are waiting in line to go in to see that movie that they themselves have not seen. It's literally the Simpsons joke where Homer walks out of the Empire Strikes Back and says the big twist in that movie, walking past everybody who has not seen the movie yet and don't know the twist is coming. So just keep that in mind, please. I will do my best to talk about things, but overall, I think it's just going to be a very positive, if vague, review. The basic plot, if I can barely bare plot, which is kind of a little spoiler for Spider-Man Far From Home. So if you haven't seen that one yet, in the 2-3 years it's been out and you want to keep it to a secret until you watch it, switch off now. But Far From Home ended with Peter Parker, Spider-Man. He's on top of the world. His girlfriend MJ knows he's Spider-Man. They're a rock solid relationship. He's got a good, strong, solid support system with his best friend Ned, who's been helping him out fighting crime and is very supportive, and a doting Aunt May. And even Tony's former bodyguard, Happy Hogan, has worked his way into the family of sorts. And he's just beaten Mysterio, Quentin Beck, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. But that movie ended with, even though Mysterio had died, he'd sent off a video to the Daily Bugle, run by J. Jonah Jameson, where he publicly outed Spider-Man as Peter Parker. So this movie picks up immediately right at the end of that film. And it first starts off with the public knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He has to go about trying to do his duties, trying to live his life while he's constantly being hounded. He's being accused because some people think that Mysterio was a hero and that he has in fact murdered him, that he is a criminal. Others are very supportive of him but won't give him his personal space. And it's all getting a lot, not just for him, but for his personal friends, all the people around him. Their lives are being ruined by association. So eventually he has the brainwave to go and see the sorcerer himself, Doctor Strange, and ask, hey Doctor Strange, could you possibly travel back in time or cast a spell or something that makes people stop knowing I am Spider-Man? Strange goes, yeah, sure. But being the jerk that Doctor Strange is, he only reveals while he's casting the spell that he's going to make everybody forget that Peter is Spider-Man, including all of the people closest to him, MJ, Ned, Aunt May, Happy Hogan, even the Avengers themselves. So Peter goes, oh no, wait, hold on, can this person remember? Can this person remember? Strange tries to comply, and the spell backfires. Everything seems fine at first. He goes about trying to find other ways to get his life back to normal, when suddenly all these villains start appearing. Villains who have appeared in other Spider-Man films, the Maguire films and the Garfield films. So Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin and a few others show up here. They start appearing, they start attacking. Peter's got to figure out why they have come through, what do they want, whether he should fight them, help them, what the dealio is. Strange is very much against just sending them back regardless of the repercussions. Things continue to get out of hand as more and more villains show up, and then eventually culminates in a big showdown of sorts where the stakes get really personal. There's still the Marvel comedy in here that we all know and love, but things get really serious. There are repercussions for the actions that characters make in here. Some fatal, others life-changing. And the movie ends in a completely different place from where it began. Spider-Man himself, the world he lives in, has changed. In order to see that, you'll have to go and watch the movie for yourself. Now, as I already revealed, 9 out of 10. I loved this film. It's definitely the best Marvel film I've seen this year. It may even be the best film of the year. It may even be near the top 5 of MCU films. I don't know. It's still fresh. I haven't thought about it too much. But overall, I'm just impressed by it and satisfied and overwhelmed at what they've managed to pull off. Spider-Man films have been notorious for fumbling their third installments, or in Andrew Garfield's case, his second installment, because they get too ambitious with what they want to do. The main culprit being too many villains. Spider-Man 3 shoved in 3 villains, Green Goblin, Sandman, and Venom. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 shoved in 3 villains, Green Goblin, Electro, and Rhino. They lost sight of what made the previous films good and started to focus too more. There was always this sense that Sony wanted to have their own cinematic universe well before they made this deal with my MCU. So they were always focused more on making movies that would set things up for other movies. And as a result, the movie itself that they released fell by the wayside. So when you're going into No Way Home and you hear that this has got at least a minimum of 5 villains, potentially more, you start to think, well, have people not learned? What are they doing? They're making the same mistake over and over again. And then you throw in the fact that this exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Doctor Strange is going to be in there. All of the characters that Peter interacts with from that world, Doctor Strange's characters that he interacts with there too. You're bringing in these other villains. You're potentially bringing in other characters from other universes. There's a lot going on. It's a long movie of almost 2.5 hours. But to be fair, Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 are also very long movies. Just because a movie is long doesn't mean it's cohesive. But surprisingly, and happily so, this is a streamlined and very well told story that doesn't collapse under its own weight. There's a lot in here. You could say it's overstuffed a tad, but not really, I think. In terms of what they're juggling, all the different characters, all the different callbacks and stories and twists and turns, it all moves along at a very good pace. It doesn't feel like you're going, okay, we're at 2 hours here and I'm starting to feel a bit, come on, get to the end. Each scene leads into another. Everything's always escalating. The film itself changes genres as it goes along, from a fugitive storyline to a who's who of classic characters to a confrontation and big final epic fight. And it's all very fresh. It's all got that humor. And at the heart of the movie is Tom Holland. That was another thing I was worried about, was the focus on all these, remember this villain from this film, remember this villain from that film, remember Doctor Strange. That for a Spider-Man movie, Tom Holland, the Spider we all know and love, he would be pushed to the wayside, or he would not get to shine as he has in the others. But at the end of the day, heart and soul, this is Tom Holland's movie. It is his journey, it is his story, from that opening moment where he's suddenly faced with a world that knows who he is, to his ultimate decisions and finality at the end of this film. Tom Holland has always been great as Peter. There's a vulnerability to him. He's probably the most comic accurate that's ever been a Peter Parker. He's great comic timing when he needs to. He can really deliver the emotional punches when something horrible happens to him. He's just wonderful to watch, and he's in probably nearly every scene of this film, so he is constantly there, which is wonderful. And the supporting cast around him, everybody is in it without feeling like they have no purpose. Doctor Strange, he's our new guest character, like Tony Stark and Nick Fury. He's a very important point to the role, and the relationship between him and Peter is very different from the relationships that the others had. You could argue that there's working towards setup for Doctor Strange's own movie, but not really. Doctor Strange is here as a tool, as a reason for why things in the films are happening. He organically comes in and out of the story when he is needed. The villains have their own points where they highlight who they are and what they want. Some villains get more spotlight than others, but each villain is different. There's not just 4 of them are bad guys and just want to do bad things and one's good. Based on who they are as characters, the character arcs that they went on in the previous movies, where they ended up, their personality, they all have very different approaches to the situations that they're in, coming across Spider-Man, getting out of their situations in one piece or not. Very specifically, 2 of the villains, I think, take center stage, while others are more played for comedic or sidekick roles. But the villains that they choose to highlight, there's a reason why they have, and they fall seamlessly back into their roles, and they're fun to watch. Aside from all that, even Spider-Man's assorted supporting cast probably get more to do in this film than I've ever done before, and it's very satisfying to see their character arcs as well. MJ and Ned are constantly there by Peter's side for the whole film. They work really well as a trio. They didn't fall into that trap of, okay, now that MJ knows that Peter is Spider-Man, Ned's going to feel a bit left out. No, they're a core trinity of teamwork, and it's great. Aunt May gets a lot to do, probably the most she's ever done in the movie as well. Happy shows up to provide some comic relief, but also some gravitas when need be. J. Jonah Jameson, who cameoed at the end of Far From Home, gets to be in the film without being silly. He's used appropriately as well. And then you've got Peter's classmates and teachers. They all pop up mainly to react to the fact that Peter is now Spider-Man, but it's done organically. It doesn't feel like, oh, we're just going to push this character in because why not? As Peter comes across each character and interacts with them, it goes, yes, in a story, this is what would be happening right now. And of course, there are other secret character cameos, which you may or may not know. I mean, whatever. It's basically, if you think that someone's going to be in the film, trust your gut, but it's still nice to have the surprise of where and when these characters are going to show up. Not just the characters everybody expects that are going to be in this film, there's also one or two little other characters that took me by surprise that I had no idea were going to be in the movie, and it fit as well with what role they were playing in the story. Aside from all that, visuals, of course, superhero movies knock it out of the park in terms of the big climactic battles. Spider-Man zipping around New York looks a million times better than back in those old Tobey Maguire days where they had that dummy that Kirsten Dunst was holding on to, swinging along with his rock arms. Music, score, there's a combination of different themes, especially villain themes that they pull in from different movies as well. It all works together seamlessly. The direction, John Watts is back, and he's always given his Spider-Man films a John Hughes vibe, which I absolutely really dig. And I like that concurrency of having the same director come back and have the same style for a continuous story across 3 films, because it feels like you're watching the third part of basically the origin of Spider-Man. It's really great. You'll have a grin on your face watching it from start to finish. As things happen and you react to them, you will probably react in a happy way that everybody in the cinema was. Maybe you're one of those people who will audibly gasp or clap. I don't know. But it's an experience. It's definitely an event that has not happened since probably Avengers Endgame, in MCU specifically, but even the fact of the dwindling interest in Star Wars, I think this is the biggest one and could be the last big blockbuster if things don't return to normal for movie theaters anytime soon. While I love this film and it's the best of the year though, I do have to say I'm having trouble with the ending. For 99% of the film, I was absolutely having a ball. I was on board, big smile on my face, or tears in my eyes, depending on the situation that I was watching. But I was also thinking, watching it, this is getting really out of hand. I do not think, in my mind, I can't come up with the solution that's going to fix everything and get everybody out of this pickle. The decision that eventually happens, which puts Peter in a certain position that is very different from the position he was in, and the characters around him, and the world that he faces and the identity that he now has, for me, I really don't like it. It left a bad taste in my mouth for the movie to end on. I was really having trouble. It may take a while for me to come to terms with it and see what the goal was here. But I think in terms of what they did, they went too far in terms of the sad finality of what they want to do with Peter and his future as Spider-Man. I think that he took one gut punch too many. I think there's a point you've got to finish your film on sort of, if you want it to be a saddish ending, you still got to have a glimmer of hope. But for me, I just felt really gut punched in terms of things have just not ended in a way that I want to. And then the semantics of it as well. I'm trying to think about it, and the situation that they've set up with doesn't work, in my opinion. You can argue that it doesn't matter because it's a superhero film and these rules don't apply, but I think there needs to be, if you're going to go the direction that they have gone, it needs to make sense, and it doesn't really make sense for me. I've been told, though, that where Peter is at the end of this film is absolutely in line with his life as Spider-Man in the comics. In fact, I was told that this basically is the origin story of the Spider-Man we know from the comics. And I can appreciate that. But in terms of the character arc for Peter in this world, the MCU world, the Spider-Man world and all that, I just think it's not something that you're going to walk out with cheering. You're going to feel bad, and not bad with the situation is like this because it had to be done. I don't know. It's hard. I'm really having trouble finding any sort of way to go, okay, I can accept it. And that unfortunately really detracted me at the end of the movie when it was trying to have this big dramatic ending to probably hint at future Spider-Man adventures and that there always will be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But I was just going, no, come on, you can't do this to him. But you will, of course, have to go and see the movie for yourself to find out. Aside from that one thing, that ending, everything else, great. Tom Holland, fantastic. Doctor Strange interactions, fantastic. Spider-Man supporting family, the villains they use. The story is great. It completely makes sense. It moves from point A to point B seamlessly. Everybody gets their moment to shine. It might have a lot going on, but it never collapses under its own weight, unlike the previous Spider-Man installments that effectively killed their franchises. It is definitely worth seeing. It is definitely worth seeing in the cinemas. You can get that cinema experience. I know, again, things are taken off and you may be a bit scared, and I understand that. So only do what you feel safe with. But if you feel comfortable, it's definitely worth it. I highly recommend it. It's definitely worth seeing. It is a very satisfactory third entry in Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It is another fantastic MCU film. Really, I don't know. I guess I'm holding out hope. I'm anxious that one day an MCU film will really disappoint me. I haven't had that yet. There's varying degrees of satisfaction, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just completely biased and they can do whatever they like and I'll just be on board. Although I'm not on board with the ending for this film, so maybe I'm not as completely closed-minded as I am worried that I am. Anyway, that's my review. 9 out of 10, Spider-Man No Way Home. Fantastic. Go see it. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. I will be back sporadically as we get into Christmas. Obviously, I have less free time because you got to do family stuff. I hope to provide my review of Hawkeye next week once the final episode drops, and also a review of The Matrix Resurrections, which I will probably be catching at some point, either in the cinemas or on HBO Max, depending on how I find the time to approach it. But those will probably be towards the end of next week. So keep an eye out for that. There may be a break over Christmas. And then once I've seen all the movies I think I want to, of course, the long-awaited top 10 movies of 2021 will come out. And I'm excited to see what finally makes that top 10 list, because it has changed dramatically in the last couple of weeks. Until then, stay safe, stay kind, Those aren't real words, but you know what I mean. And I, as always, will catch you next time here on Spliced In Later. Adios, muchachos.